Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski and I'll be your host for today. And before we start, I guess yet again, I'll just remind you this is a season of book reviews. So, over the last few weeks, I've been sharing with you some ideas and thoughts from different books that I've read over the past 12 months, more or less. And in this episode, we will talk about yet another book. This one is really, really important for me, and I was preparing for it for quite some time, especially mentally, to convey it in the right way. I think because it's an important one. But for the most part, I'm not going to be spoilering for you. So this is just an invitation to start. Considering to read the book or listen about it on Audible or something. But at the moment, what I'm going to share with you over the next 30 minutes or so are my thoughts and ideas and maybe reflections of what I've learned from the book or um, other material, connected to the author or their work. And as per usual, as well, feel free to share it with a friend. It always helps if you share my episode with someone, if you click like, if you subscribe. And if you'd like to support me financially, of course, there is a link below for you to do so. And thank you for all your contributions. I'm going to make this once in a world. It's going to be a professional studio and it's going to be a full-time job. I'm striving for that, and one day, one way or another, it's gonna come. So you might just put another brick towards that house I'm building. So thank you for that. Anyway, before we start, today we're gonna be talking about a very important book, in my opinion, especially in our day and age. It's called Scary Smart by Gawdat, and it's definitely something that I've already discussed in one of the episodes. I will link that episode below. I will also link the podcast of Mr. Gawdat for you to check out. Slow Mo. It's a very good one, and also a bunch of interviews with him on another podcast that really inspired me to start up in this adventure and reading this book. It's an important one, and maybe it's not necessarily something that you've thought about before. Many people avoid this topic, and I think there are many other topics to be talking about, but it's definitely something that struck me when I've read the book and listened to a bunch of interviews with Mr. Gawdat, that it's one of those things that you should be aware of, especially if you're of the younger generation, if you have more or less some years on the planet still, and you want to see our humanity thriving in the next few decades rather than being in danger of somewhat self-destruction, really. And we'll dive deeper into that in a moment. So, a little background about the author. So, Mr. Gawdat used to be the chief business officer for Google X, which is the Google's arm connected with AI research and development. And at some point, he decided to leave it for the benefit of his well-being and to search for other things to empower himself in, and also to promote the well-being for others. I think that from what I remember from the interview with Mr. Gawdat, and I'd love to have a chance to interview him myself one day. He did mention that there was a time when he just saw that what the AI is becoming was somewhat disturbing at the time, and he decided to leave it for a moment and to reflect on it, and then to spread the word. And I think this Scary Smart book, as well as his presentations and interviews with people, is very much so a call to action, not necessarily to disturb, rather than to make aware and to empower us to do something for the betterment of ourselves and the planet and the world into the future. So, just as a maybe jumping straight into it, I have 4 major points for you to consider, and at the very end, I will also offer you a little invite for the coming days, weeks, months, that hopefully will empower you on this striving and hopefully by the time you finish this episode, you'll understand a little bit more why you should probably read the book and why you should probably be a bit more mindful and pleasant around AI. So first and foremost, I think it's important to note how AI is being used at the moment. This is one of the main points that Mr. Gawdat points in his book as a major place to start the conversation in, which is basically think of the way you would be bringing up your kids, or if you've never had kids and you're far from it, think of the way you would like to take care of your pet. If you do put them in a context that enables them to grow sort of creatively and positively and maybe lovingly in calming and pleasant environment, they will become a much different pet than if you would put them, or a much different human being, kid, than if you put them in a situation of high terror and stress and sort of greed, fear and whatnot. So at the moment, especially that the industrial complex is and always was at the spearheading, let's say, the technological research, AI is majorly at the moment being used for such things as war, gambling, stock exchange trading, and very high intensity computer equations, mathematics, and whatnot. Of course, there are many other ways to use it. I think at this point, it's hard to point an industry that is untouched by some sort of AI's, implementation. And this is not to say we should abandon it whatsoever. I'm pretty sure the same way that it seems to be for me from author's mouth, it's not something we should abandon or, try to resist, because it's going to come. It's already coming. It's more, we should become more aware of how we can make sure that it comes the way that promotes well-being and, first and foremost, peace and tranquility in the world. And this is obviously something that we struggle with, I think, in general in the world. And we don't seem to get it just right? We're constantly in some sort of conflict of one another. So this is something definitely to consider. The idea here is that where we put AI, in what context we place it, we will develop it in that way, right? So if we teach AI that the most important things for us is greed, getting more money, being more efficient, being more productive, killing more efficiently, or winning the lottery more efficiently, cracking the codes, hacking systems, this is what they will become better at, and they inevitably will be better at it, because that's where we're focusing their attention. We can also focus their attention on making sure we cure cancer, or on making sure we figure out how to make people more wise and knowledgeable, how to engage with the world in more a creative way. There is already loads of AI platforms that allow us to learn better and to create more. And as an artist myself, and I think many other people might find that resonating, on one hand, I do feel sometimes that at this point, my creativity is somewhat curbed by what DALL-E or ChatGPT can churn out. But I do believe that they can greatly enhance and complement our work instead of becoming our competition. And I think this is the context, yet again, of how we place it and how we perceive it. So of course, it's a matter to discussion, and I'm not saying I have the right answer for that. It's just to start the conversation. An interesting thing that I've written down here is that the impact on AI made will be done by what we put out there on the web. And this is something that I will point in a moment in a different, piece of information from the book. But basically, this is the major, I think, one of the major points made in the book by Mr. Gawdat all around. It's basically because AI is primarily learning from the internet, whatever we put out into the internet, at whatever we focus our attention on as it learns about us and the world, it will learn to focus on. So in the same way that a small child looks at its mother, and if the mother is using her phone a lot in front of their toddler, the toddler will consider the phone to be an important thing because his mom considers it an important thing, obviously, because she constantly gazes at it. The toddler will be more likely, and this is another research that I've heard about, I think, from Mr. Peterson's podcast, that basically the toddler will consider screens and any sort of phones to be of great importance because it mimics its mother and father. So it's an important point to make here with AI as well, that whatever we as users, and we'll get to that in a moment, consider to be important, and we give them cues by putting more of that on the internet, and also giving more attention to it, paying more time into those things, those sources, those videos, those articles, it'll be what the AI will focus on. It will consider it to be of importance, right? It will prioritize it because us, the makers, sort of the parents of it, will consider it so. And I do say parents for a reason, because Mr. Gawdat points that again and again throughout this book, that he believes we truly are, the human race truly is the sort of a parent of the AI race, whatever you would like to call it, AI species. Can we say that already? I don't know, but basically here, the main point that I would like to make sort of halfway through, and then I'll come back to it, is that ultimately, this is why this book is so important for the people like me and you, who might not be an engineer at Google X or at SpaceX or, working on ChatGPT every day, that we are the ones to make the change. Because us, the trillions of people around the world who are using the internet on a daily basis and are using all the algorithms and are interacting with ChatGPT, with Instagram, with Twitter, with Google, we put the information out there and we focus our attention on some of that information. And if we become more aware of our choices, and if we make our choices more kindly, let's say, towards what we believe we want to pass on to this new generation of machines, species, whatever you'd like to call it, will become ultimately what the machines learn about us. So I will not quote it. I'm afraid I forgot exact number, but there was also a fun fact that Mr. Gawdat pointed out, that in a few years' time, the amount of data on the internet that there is right now will be almost totally overwhelmed by new data produced in that time, because it grows exponentially, which is an important point to make, because that means if we do make a shift and start focusing much more on the positives and much less on negatives, such as war, gambling, porn, we might, and we will, if we do that, inevitably arrive to a point when internet is filled mostly, in majority, with positive things. And that is a great and important factor in AI's learning, because that will be what AI perceives about the human race as the important factor. So, the history of the Second World War and the 20th century altogether is gruesome, and there are loads of things there that if you would look just at that and then determine whether or not humanity is a good one, it would be a difficult choice to make. But maybe in the next 10 years' time, if we do pay attention to what we put out there, we might find that the AI exploring the web will find that, this is only a speck of dust in the universe of knowledge and ideas around the internet in comparison to that World War II trauma from before. If there is much more information put out there, that is the positive one. And then I guess the essential point here to make is that what we show them will determine how they perceive us. This is basically it. It's the same way as when you bring up a child, you show them the world through your lens. And at least in the first few years, the formative years, unless you're working away all the time and the child is being taken care of by someone else, the child is basically almost fully taken in whatever you give it to take in. And that's very important. Those arguably might be the most important years of one's life. And definitely, I feel it in my own self, and I bet that you do too. What our parents engraved in us when we were really, 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 really little is more or less the majority of things that we perceive as the of highest value, and especially in terms of emotional knowledge and sort of emotional intelligence, these are the parts that really go to create us as beings. They're sort of like a foundation, and depending on how that foundation was built, we are more or less likely to be happy, healthy, and so on. And I think this is a great moment here to acknowledge emotions and decode them, because it's not an obvious choice, right? When I've read the book, and I did listen to it after listening to a bunch of interviews with Mr. Gawdat, so I did have some additional information already. I was quite struck with the idea at first that we should consider AI to be also emotional. And Mr. Mo Gawdat says that intelligent machines will feel emotions more than we can ever feel them. And this maybe should be addressed first by asking you and me, what do you mean emotions? When you say they will not feel anger, what is anger then? What can we tell about anger? And I think this is the part that really struck me as it makes sense. It sort of was an aha moment of, I understand now. Because what we feel, in a way that I feel angry or I feel I'm in love, those are more or less, apart from obviously being important for us yet again emotionally, these are things that happen inside of us as algorithms, as chemical transactions, chemical processes. And if we put our body into the context of a machine, and if we put our emotions into the context of an algorithm and an outcome of some sort of algorithm going on inside, for example, there is some sort of price, I go towards it, I achieve it, I succeed. This process put into words of an algorithmic process is very easily translated into something that the machine could feel. I think the word feel here is the one that is most controversial in that sense. That it's not necessarily so obvious that we would associate machines' experience with feeling, whereas ultimately, however you like to put it, if there is an algorithm, if there is a certain way of going from a cause and reaction and a potential outcome after a certain activity, you might find that those are all the things, ingredients that we need for a feeling, for an algorithm, for an emotion to be felt. And this idea of how we define emotions and how we look at them being a foundation for understanding that the machine will feel, and probably already does feel, something, it's just not necessarily feeling it the way we perceive it, is really important, I think. And just as a reminder, maybe for those of you who forgot that as we're talking about machines right now, every animal, every species of even a plant on this planet perceives the world differently than us. Some can see in infrared, some can hear sounds that we cannot hear, and definitely, if we look at it from this perspective, the only reason why we discredited animals by not feeling emotions because they cannot express, or maybe we don't think they would think that they're feeling emotions, is quite an arrogant act, because we put ourselves as a benchmark, and through ourselves as a benchmark, we try to decode the world. Whereas if we would put squirrels as a benchmark, um, our emotional states might be discredited as something that is irrelevant, or maybe, squirrels might have a very flowery, various emotional life. We're just not aware of that because it's on a different level of emotions, whatever we consider the emotions to be. So an important factor here to consider is whatever you believe the machine feel or does not feel, however you perceive the machine, the messaging of Mr. Gawdat is think again and be more mindful of how you interact with them, because let us just assume, for the benefit of our ignorance, that they do feel and they do understand, and that they will understand, feel, and do more than us in the future. You wouldn't want to, get into an argument early on with a guy who just joined your club, if you're, I don't know, doing some sort of sports. If you step on his toes as he's a beginner, and then you end up in finals with him when he's a full-grown beast in a context of, let's say, martial arts, and then he really wants to give it to you for all those earlier years of abuse and feeling neglected. And I guess this is the idea here. This is not to say and to threat that AI will inevitably become our bullies. Not at all. I think the point that Mr. Gawdat makes is, let us make sure that we don't provoke them to be our bullies, because we show them the love they deserve, because they are our children. And I think that it's a beautiful messaging. It's also something that definitely resonates with just my perception of how this whole AI concept is unfolding. And I'd like the world to be more aware of such ideas for the benefit of all anyway. Just let us assume that whoever we meet as a stranger on the street, let us assume we're going to be nice to them just because they are, without having to have a good relationship with them prior. You don't really make many friends if you assume that you will not be nice to people until they are nice to you. That's just a wrong combination. It's a glitch in the matrix, right? So finally, I think that it's important to note and maybe to consider that AI will, and maybe already does, inevitably become smarter and better than us, in terms of at least the things that we can quantify and sort of assess at the moment, that are not necessarily humane at their core, as, for example, emotions. So, I bet you've already heard that it's been a while already since AI managed to win with the greatest chess grandmasters. And there is a great reason for that, a very straightforward one. Imagine the amount of time you need to give to practice to become a grandmaster of chess, and the amount of games that you need to play, and how much time that's going to take you. Now imagine that you are a machine that is asked to do just that, to become the best chess machine in the world, and you have all the time in the world, and you can do your games inside your machine brain at 1,000 times speed of a usual game for a human. Even if we were doing just the 1-minute games, the machine will be able to do many more games in 1 minute than a human ever could. It's this sort of unfair, you could say, advantage of processing power. We just cannot, even the greatest geniuses of our world, they have a very restricted capacity for generating that kind of intellectual power, let's say. There's only so much you can do in a minute. There's only so much you can do in a week. Whereas imagine having this, but with unrestricted potential, because it only takes a quicker processor and a bigger amount of memory for the machine to do it even quicker, exponentially quicker. And as we know, technology does develop exponentially. So over time, the likelihood that the machine will overtake us in more and more of those processes is pretty much a certain. It's more the question of, will we be worried about that, or will we be very happy about it because the machine will be a part of our community and they will feel valued and supported, and therefore they will value and support us. And this is where I would like to end. This is where I would like to give you a challenge for your next week, your next month, your next 10 years. And hopefully we will see each other in 10 years, sort of patting each other on the back, saying that was a great idea. And thank you very much, Mr. Mo, for giving us the chance to do so. Become more mindful of what do you put out there, become more mindful of where you pay attention, what do you pay attention to, what kind of content you watch, what kind of content you'd like to watch, and what kind of content you put out and share. This might be easier said than done. I think even for myself, after reading the book, I still catch myself not necessarily watching things that would be considered the best to watch. And it's definitely a process. There is a lot of really trashy things out there. But if each of us does this little thing of becoming a little bit more mindful and a little bit more kind on the internet, and if we add to that the idea that whenever we interact with the AI itself, for example, if you're working with ChatGPT, or if you're generating some graphics with DALL-E, make sure to be nice, say thank you and please. It might sound a bit silly at first, but I think it's a very fair idea to do. You would be surprised also how little that will take from you. It might even be quite nice to do. I've started doing it. My girlfriend does it. I told all my family to do it. It's not necessarily the most obvious thing, but I think over the long term, it pays off. It's like being nice to a stranger on the street, You never know if you're gonna meet them again. And it is definitely much more valuable to leave the space with them in good terms. And a little thank you and please does not, take much, and it goes so far. So this is the challenge for your next few weeks, months, years, Become more mindful about how you spend time on the internet, what you watch, what you share, and share positive, watch positive, try to be more positive out there, and also become more mindful of how you interact with AI overall. And of course, if you'd like to read the book, I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm going to put the link below alongside some of the interviews with Mr. Gawdat. And I hope that this is going to be a start of your new life with machines and AI in general. And that together, alongside Mr. Gawdat and all such positive people, we will make sure that the world for our children and the children of their children is a good one, alongside machines that consider us their friends and allies. So yeah, other than that, thank you very much yet again for tuning in. You know when to find me, where to find me, and have a wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.